ونحمده على هدايته ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين. اللهم صل على محمد. Sisters and brothers, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as we move from one night to the next. We are getting very close to Ayyam al-Biyad, which is the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th of the month of Ramadan. Extremely critical in preparation for the 19th and the Layal al-Qadr. So we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept our prayers, fasting, supplications, invocations, du'as, everything else, the citation of Quran. قال الإمام السجاد عليه الصلاة والسلام: وأما حق ولدك عليك أن تعلم أنه منك ومضاف إليك وإنك مسؤول عما وليته من حسن الأدب والدلالة على ربه فمثاب على ذلك ومعاقب. The right of children on parents. Imam Sajjad salawatullah alayhi has a book called Kitab al-Huquq or Risalat al-Huquq, the treatise on right. Before Westerners talked about human right, obligations, etc., detailed account of every member of the society as right against somebody else. When it comes to the family structure, Imam talks about the right of husbands on men, wives, the right of wives on husbands, and the right of parents on children, the reverse, the right of children on their parents. So what you need to know, first of all, in أن تعلم أنه منك, you have brought them into this world. ومضاف إليك, so whatever they do is part of your responsibility. You cannot deny your responsibility because you have not brought any. Well, the child has his or her own responsibility. Parents are responsible for what they have taught their children. وَإِنَّكَ مَسْئُولٌ عَمَّا وَلَّيْتَ. Whatever you teach the child, you are responsible for it. مِنْ حُسْنِ الْأَدَبِ, ethical and moral rules, role models, etc. It's your responsibility. And the greatest responsibility that parents have when it comes to the children, وَالدَّلَالَةَ عَلَى رَبِّهِ. You as parents have to include within your upbringing some kind of a strategy that you guide the children towards Allah and faith. And remember, مُثَابٌ عَلَى ذَلِكَ, once you discharge your responsibility, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would reward you for it. وَمُعَاقَبٌ, and would punish you if you don't. Now hold to this hadith, we'll come back to it inshallah after we go through the recap of last night. The concept of akhlaq is something that we talked about a couple of nights ago when we were talking about the story of Luqman and his advice to his son. And one of the issues that I mentioned, I said, it's a tragedy that our children have no respect for parents. Last night, the main topic of our conversation was the life of al-Mu'mineen Khadijah al-Kubra, the first remarkable woman in the history of Islam, extraordinary character that sacrificed her life, her wealth, and everything else to go around and violated all social norms that existed in Jahiliyyah to follow the Holy Prophet and support the Holy Prophet. And among the issues that I talked about was the dispute or the differences of opinion between scholars, historians regarding the time of birth, which had consequences as to what time at what age she got married, number of children, her relationship with the Holy Prophet, her absolute support for the Holy Prophet, and the fact that despite the fact that she was born into a wealthy family that had its own status within the Jahiliyyah society, she sacrificed everything, her wealth and everything else, for the support. Finally, I mentioned that al-Mu'mineen Khadija, being such a unique character, left us with a number of legacies or lessons from her life that would apply to our life. And this should be something that we should normally analyze whenever there is a story about the life of whether the Imam or anybody else, some unique characters. It's not just the historical part that we want to learn. What have they left us with as a lesson, as a legacy that we can implement it in our life? I said the first thing that we can learn from the life of al-Mu'mineen Khadija, the choice teaching the women in our, as well as men, to focus on unique characteristics when they search for partners. Wealth, beauty, and so on, these are transient issues, but instead the concept of kuf is to focus on akhlaq, ethics, morality, because what attracted her to the Holy Prophet was his truthfulness, amana, and humility, humbleness, etc. Also, the resoluteness about choosing the right path. Once you have decided that this is the right path, you remain steady, even if it means breaking the social norms that you live in. Because now you know you are on the right path and you stay steady. Muslim women and men need to understand their social structure. al-Mu'mineen Khadija immediately realized that the Holy Prophet, the moment of proclamation, is going to change the world. And naturally, there would be a reaction from the Jahiliyyah society towards this Risala. She made it clear, she chose her path and stayed fast on that path, on that path, even at the expense of insult and everything else that the society gave to her. Respect for partners. You never condescendingly call your partner or lower your partner or try to demean your partner. Even if you are the richest person and happen to marry a person which is much lower than you in the status, social status, you never remind them that without me you would have been nobody. Or if you worked, say the husband doesn't have a job and you have all the potential to support, once he becomes successful, you don't remind the husband that, look, if I didn't support you, you are not going to get anywhere. Trust in the partner. That was another. The al-Mu'mineen Khadija had absolute trust in the Holy Prophet. That after spending all her wealth, when finally Quraysh decided that they want, because Abu Talib and Khadija were there to support the Holy Prophet, they were not going to somehow leave the Holy Prophet by himself, so they decided to exile them, to go to the valley of Abu Talib outside Mecca. Khadija walked, some ahadith say, barefooted, following the Holy Prophet, to stay over there. She could have come back and appealed to the status that she had within the society and leave the husband. Absolute trust. Giving charity in the sake of Allah, a theme that today in Salatul Jum'ah we discussed it briefly. This is something that, again, something that we should learn. Now let's return to the hadith that I read at the beginning. When we started talking about the story of Luqman, I said that the story of Luqman is a very unique and heartwarming story that presents the close relationship of the father with his son. and how he chooses the strategy of softly approach to talk to his child, to his son, and impart knowledge, wisdom that he has to the child. Ya bunay aqim as-salat wa'amur bil ma'ruf wanha 'anil munkar, and everything else, reminding the child that no matter how small an iota of your action, your deed, ultimately on the day of judgment, it's going to be there and Allah would bring it out and you're going to see it. That led us to this notion, the phenomena that today we are confronted, where our children have no respect and reverence for their parents, their elders. And I said, I had the intention of following it up, but then the story of the life of Khadija came in. Inshallah, I'll finish it tonight. Trying to what this hadith is, I'm going to explain it in a minute. The hadith is telling us that expectation of respect for the elders within society, for our children, it depends on the foundation that we organize for our children. It comes part of akhlaq, and akhlaq is part of the way we bring up our children. And the hadith from the Imam alayhi salatu wasalam, وَأَمَّا حَقُّ وَلَدِكَ عَلَيْكَ إِنَّهُ مِنْكَ وَمُضَافٌ إِلَيْكَ. You cannot dispense with the idea that this is some kind of a mushroom that I have nothing to do with it. No, once you have brought that person, whether a boy or a girl, into this world, it is your responsibility. Both parents are responsible. وَإِنَّكَ مَسْئُولٌ. There is a profound responsibility about upbringing of the child. You can't just negate it. من عما وليته من حسن الأدب, the right etiquette and akhlaq and moral foundation. If we as parents don't spend time teaching our children the moral principles, we cannot single out only the respect for parents to be there, while everything else about the moral principle to be dismissed. A child will automatically deviate or comes towards this when the foundation is strong. If there are no foundation, and particularly our responsibility to guide them towards the faith. Why? Because in Islam, the foundation of moral principle is based on what we call Sharia. What is halal, what is haram, what is makruh, what is mustahab, and etc., etc. So our ethical and moral principle, do's and don't do's, are not based on the legal thing that passed one day in, say, the house, and a few days later is negated and changed around. No, there is a fundamental principle within the faith that we have to follow. And who is it that has to create this foundation for the children? The parents. If we don't do it, if we don't create that solid, firm foundation for the children to go back to and constantly self-evaluate, when you teach them what is right, what is wrong, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is keeping an eye. Just read the story of Luqman again. Allah is keeping an eye on everything that you do, everything that we do. And the child literally takes this into the heart and mind. Then when you come back and say, son, daughter, whatever phrase one uses, respect is part of that religious and moral obligation. Then وَقَضَى رَبُّكَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ makes sense. Why? Because the foundation of faith is there. Otherwise, it becomes mere laqlaqatul lisan, paying lip service to the principle. All of our books about fiqh, akhlaq, and so on, from the first volume to the 10th volume, one way or the other, they talk about these moral principles. But why is it that our children don't behave? Because you try to bring it to their attention only as a matter of what we call knowledge or reading. That most of the time when they walk out of the school, the book is shut until next week. They don't do anything. They don't read it, and they don't go over it. So the expectation that they went to Saturday school or Sunday school, and volume 1, page 34, was talking about the responsibility of the parents. You expect them to practice it. It's not going to happen because the foundation of faith is weak. We didn't discharge our responsibility properly. You can't put the blame on them. So singling out and saying that I want only to focus on the respect to the parents, while the moral foundation is not there, I didn't do my duty. It's not going to happen. But if we discharge our responsibility properly and go according to this hadith that says they belong to you, they are indispensable from your life. You can't simply step back and say, I have no responsibility. وَإِنَّكَ مَسْئُولٌ. On the day of judgment, you are going to be questioned on what you have brought up. Whether did you teach them good moral akhlaq and so on or not? Did you guide them towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Right from the beginning, did you create that spark that the child's heart is connected to Allah? We all know from our ahadith, كُلُّ مَوْلُودٍ يُولَدُ عَلَى الْفِطْرَةِ, the purity of the nature at the time of birth. Unlike the notion of Christianity regarding the original sin, that somehow they believe that the original sin corrupts humanity beyond repair. No, we say that at the moment of birth, there is purity for every child, boy, girl, all children. If they later on deviate and go away from the right path, it's because of that unique environment that the parents created for them, the nurture dynamics that we didn't pay attention. If my child has no foundation, no ethical foundation, then suddenly coming up when they reach the age and say, from tomorrow I want you to follow this command and respect me, and say, yes, dad, Amrak, dad. It's the way you say it, dad. It's strange to them. Because on what basis? This is right and that's wrong. When you give them that foundation, the moral foundation becomes something that they can, rich source of going back to it, the resources, going back to it and make a judgment. Why is it that our adolescents are what we call somehow lost their identity? Because there are no bases to go back and say that use this experience or knowledge. Luqman uses his knowledge to translate or transmit the knowledge to the child slowly. But if we don't do it, it's not going to happen. So this bear this in mind. But in case you want to do a few steps, guideline, that let's see that the moral foundation, assume that the moral foundation is there, but you are looking for guidelines to navigate and teach your children. Number one, establish trust. If your children have no trustful relationship with you, preaching to them is not going to lead anything. They really have to be convinced from early age that mother, father, they want the best for them. And that way, any advice that comes out is accepted. Number two, be the role model for your children, because teaching must begin with an example. If they see us not practicing what we preach, we tell our children, don't tell lies, but we tell lies. At the few moments after we tell the child, don't tell lies, the telephone rings and you are sitting at home. Somebody says, is your dad at home? And you say, tell him I'm not here. confuses the child, because this counters what a few minutes ago you told the child, tell the truth, that we are asking them to do. The importance and significance of what one tries to teach, then it is lost. You constantly bombard them, do this, do that, don't do this, and you do what you have just told your child not to do it. Number 3, begin early and reinforce often. If you want your children to have a unique moral principle, begin at early age, before at least some of these bad habits have already found a degree of space in the mind of a child. And reinforce, constantly remind them, not just once. You may have to do it 3, 4, 5 times a day. Reinforce it. Remember that your children are born with pure mindset, but they don't have the rules and etiquettes and moral that they need in the future life. They have to be taught. That's why you send them to school to teach math, science, or something else, or even languages. In the same manner, they need to be taught fundamental moral principles, because their mind is pure, distinguishing as to what is right and what is wrong in a particular social structure, the role of the parents. Be stern, but don't humiliate the child, which means one of the best ways to model the respect is to be kind and firm. That's why the Hadith says divides the life of a child until the age of 21 in 3 phases. The early phase, 7 years, the second phase, and the third phase. The second phase say the parents are responsible to be little bit firmer than playfulness, and set etiquette and boundaries before the child goes to adolescence. But don't humiliate them. When you set these stern, don't negotiate with the child. This is the limit. This is how you should behave. No going back and forth. Once they understand that the red line cannot be crossed, it goes into their head, then it becomes easier. Be consistent. Not if you do it one day and the next few days you just ignore it. A child comes up with a rude comment about the parents, and the parents this time don't say anything, tomorrow they don't say anything, third day they come back and they say, look son, this is not acceptable. Consistency means you have to constantly use this. Then some people say that some psychologists, child psychologists say that you might have to deal with your children by creating negative consequences for them if they misbehave. I remove your gadget. If they are younger, remember, we have these 3 phases: early childhood, middle, and adolescence. Each of them, there is a unique strategy to be dealt with. So early childhood, you might say, time out. Go and sit in your room and wait. Or remove some of the toys, etc. Later on, you have to come up with a different strategy to deal with it. Parents have to be able to understand, as the child develops and moves from one stage to another, what buttons to push, so that the child attention is drawn to it. Learn the art of communication and hold them accountable. One of the problems that we have these days, because of this linguistic differences, our parents are unable to communicate with children in most cases, particularly when the parents have come from somewhere else, with the children that probably they have very little knowledge of the native language. It's our responsibility to try to work hard and learn communication skill. By the way, communication skill works even with husband and wife in a family relationship before even the children get involved. So you have to tell your child to make a distinction between genuine questioning when they have a question. So you want their mind to be inquisitive. You don't want them to be somehow left as a couch potato. They have no power, no critical thinking, but you don't allow, at the same time, you don't want them to be disrespectful. So make a distinction here. Praising, when you try to praise, be specific. I am proud of you or good job might work when you are trying to express your love and affection for the children. But it's not going to work when you're trying to reinforce for a particular behavior. For a particular behavior, you have to be specific. For example, I'm happy or I'm delighted to see that you said please, or thank you, or ask my permission. You praise them for a specific purpose, so they understand where the praise goes. And instead of thank you for saying, you say thank you for saying please, or thank you for saying thank you, or thank you for asking my permission. The way you talk to your children is critical as well. And sometimes you have to avoid saying it in a manner that confuses the child. When you leave it broad thank, the child is confused as what is this? What did I do that deserve this praise? Be mindful of what is being influenced from outside. And this is most critical factor for us living here, and our children spend 8 or 9 hours a day outside our family structure. And the influence of the secular system on their mindset is immense. I remember many years ago in the 1980s when I was in England, Dr. Kaleem Siddiq here, the head of the Muslim Parliament at the time, became curious to find out the effect of secular state on the mind of the children. They did a huge research. The conclusion that was drawn was, for every hour that your child spends, in this what we call secular state, you need 2 hours, at least 2 hours, to clean their mind of their side effect. Now imagine your child spends 6 or 7 hours in a secular state. Then how many hours do we need to clean the mind, which under normal circumstances we don't have such a time, which clearly stated that we really need to understand the effect of this environment on the mind of the child. So coordinate with the school, talk to teachers, organize practical classes, even at mosques and Sunday school. You should have a degree of PowerPoint and something that would teach the children, bring it pictorially, bring it to the attention of the child, that look, respect, moral principle, and everything else has to be there. We in the West, parents in the West, we are faced with this dilemma. There is an expectation from our side, our children to behave like us vis-a-vis our parents, how we behave. But the foundation to implant these moral principles are absent. The school does not become part and parcel, or at least complementary to the effort that parents put. And back home, I'm sure those who come from other countries, if my child went out of the house and misbehaved, I would have expected the neighbors to become second fathers or stepfathers and come back and say, look, son, this is not acceptable. So the role of neighbor would reinforce the role of the family. If they went to school, it was the same thing, the teachers and the school environment. Unfortunately, here, none. So this dilemma has to be resolved by us taking extra time of teaching our children the moral principle. Language differences and usage when we ask our children to be respectful, put it in a language that they understand, because they are familiar with various languages that we as parents probably have minimal understanding of that language. We may be able to get by, but minimal understanding they speak. If you want your children to show respect by using certain words, yes, mom, yes, dad, give it to them. Don't just say, be respectful. I want you to say please when you want something. I want to say thank you when somebody gives you something. I want you to say yes, mom, or no, mom, or dad, or something else. These are literally what they are saying. The specialists, chew it one by one and teach the child. Over time, once you reinforce it, then it becomes a second habit. A critical factor that one cannot stress enough is the parents, both of them have to be on the same line when it comes to teaching moral principles to the children. One of the problems that we have with different marriages from different faith is that each one takes the child in different direction. The stable foundation for moral principle does not exist in such a relationship. Let us give you an example. The husband is Muslim, the wife is Christian. The husband said pork is not halal, is haram. The wife said there's no problem, I'm eating it. The husband says alcohol is haram. Sunday morning she goes to church and she drinks. So the child is in the middle, confused, doesn't know what to do. This is why agreeing on a plan, having the right mindset and agreeing on a plan is fundamental. You sit down and you agree on a plan, how you're going to approach it. And please don't contradict each other. Once you have agreed on a plan, even if your wife or your husband makes a mistake in implementing the plan, don't go immediately challenging the parents in front of the children. Take your partner aside and say, honey, this is what we agreed upon. I would have expected you to follow what we agreed upon, rather than immediately in front of the child. No, that's not acceptable. So what happened? The child understands that there is a disconnect between the father and the mother. And it's like a raw point, they keep pressing it. So to wrap up, in conclusion, fundamentally, the akhlaq, etiquette, is part of ethical and moral principle that we have to teach our children because they don't possess it. And as far as everything else, it requires certain plan and following these guidelines. Inshallah, by doing it this way, particularly now that we have other schools are not doing it, this Saturday or Sunday schools become the most important factor in trying to teach them. So the same way that you teach them about Salat, you should have a section with PowerPoint, teach them the concept of moral principle and the respect for parents. Never forget, you are the role model. And if you have parents or elders around the area, take your children when you go and visit them and show them respect. In front of your children, kiss their hand. Even go bow in front of your mother and father and kiss their feet. This way, they begin to think this is some kind of a unique relationship. May Allah protect us, all of us, and help us in whatever is left of the month of fasting, in accepting our du'as, and ultimately, as we plan things in our life, become successful in bringing up children that ultimately they're going to become the image for remembering us and other people. There is a hadith that says longevity happens with three things. Either you establish some kind of a social institution in which people come into this institution and benefit from it, and they say, may God bless this or that made it. The other one is that you have knowledge and impart the knowledge to your students, and the students would say, may God bless our professor. The third, you bring up khalaf al-salih, children that their lifestyle would remind they embody the principle, values, moral principles that the parents had, and every time they behave in that manner, people say, may God bless the soul of the father and the mother that brought them up in a manner that are respectful and follow the ethical and moral. Thank you very much. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa
barakatuh. So, continuation to this.